The day I lost my fiancé to my own sister didn't start with a fight, or a confession, or anything dramatic enough to warn me that my life was about to split into two completely different versions. It started like every other normal day. And that was exactly why I didn't see it coming. On paper, everything looked stable in a way that made people comfortable. The kind of life that earns approval without anyone asking too many questions. I was 31, working a steady marketing job, living in a small apartment that felt like independence, even if it stretched my finances, and engaged to a man who fit perfectly into the image my family had always expected for me. My mother loved him, not just because of who he was, but because of what he represented. Proof that I had finally done things right, that I had reached the version of life she believed I was supposed to have. And I let myself believe that too, because it felt easier than questioning why everything needed to look perfect in the first place. But what I didn't realize was that while I was focused on building something stable, something real, the people closest to me were quietly rewriting that version of my life without including me in it. And by the time I understood what was actually happening, I wasn't losing something. It had already been taken. My sister had always treated my life like something she needed to measure herself against, but never in a way that was obvious enough to confront without being turned into the problem. It wasn't loud jealousy or open competition. It was controlled. Precise. Like she understood exactly how far she could go before anyone would question her intentions. Growing up, if I achieved something, she didn't take it from me directly. She repositioned herself until the attention shifted back to her, just enough to make whatever I had done feel smaller. I convinced myself that phase had ended, that we were adults now, that whatever existed between us had flattened into something manageable. But the moment I brought my fiancé into that space, something changed. And this time it didn't feel subtle. It felt strategic. She became more present than necessary, more involved than invited, inserting herself into conversations that didn't include her, offering help I hadn't asked for, finding reasons to be around him that always sounded reasonable on the surface. She laughed at his jokes a little too easily, touched his arm just long enough to feel intentional without being inappropriate, and asked questions that made it seem like she was supporting us while quietly positioning herself closer to him every time. And he didn't pull away. That was the part I ignored the longest. Not because I didn't see it, but because acknowledging it meant admitting something I wasn't ready to face. At the same time, he started changing in ways that were harder to explain. Late replies, calls he stepped away to take, messages he angled his phone away from without thinking I would notice. Small things, individually harmless, but together they formed something I couldn't dismiss. And every time I tried to bring it up, he reframed it, calmly, making it sound like I was overthinking, overreacting, misreading completely normal behavior. Slowly, without realizing it, I stopped trusting my own perception. Be honest, if your own sister started acting like this around your fiancé, would you trust them or assume something was already going on? Comment your first instinct. The moment everything stopped being explainable didn't come all at once. It came in details that felt small enough to dismiss until they started connecting in ways I couldn't ignore anymore. The first was the scent. Sharp and floral, lingering on his shirt when I leaned in too close. Not mine. Not anything I owned. But familiar in a way that made my stomach tighten before I could even place why. He explained it quickly. Too quickly. Something about a client, a hug, an interaction that meant nothing. And I nodded like it made sense even though part of me had already started pulling at the thread. The second was the earring. Small. Silver. Easy to miss if you weren't paying attention. But I recognized it immediately because I had seen my sister wear it more times than I could count. When I held it up, he didn't hesitate. Said it was hers. Said he had given her a ride recently. And the explanation came out so smoothly it almost sounded rehearsed. Later, when I asked her about it, she gave me the same version. Same phrasing. Same casual tone. Like they had already aligned their story before I ever questioned it. That was when the discomfort turned into something sharper. something I couldn't push down as easily. But I still tried. Because accepting what it meant would have required me to admit that everything I trusted was already compromised. Even when I found them late at night in my parents' house, standing too close in a dimly lit room. Voices low. Bodies angled toward each other in a way that didn't look accidental. I let them explain it away. I let myself believe it. Because the alternative was worse. But denial only works until reality forces you to see it clearly. And that moment came a few days later when I walked into his office unannounced, carrying lunch like someone still trying to hold on to something that no longer existed. And this time, there was nothing to misinterpret. They weren't just close. They were kissing. For a second, none of us moved. Like the room itself hadn't caught up to what was happening. And then everything shifted all at once in a way that made it impossible to go back to anything I had believed before. She pulled away first. Not panicked. Not even ashamed. Just slightly annoyed. Like I had interrupted something that mattered more than I did. And that was the moment I understood this wasn't new to them. He started talking immediately. Stepping toward me. Saying my name like that would soften what I was seeing. Like there was a version of this that could still be explained if he just found the right words. She didn't wait for him to finish. You were going to find out anyway, she said. Calm. Controlled. Like this was just an inconvenient reveal instead of a betrayal that had been building for months. And when he added, almost automatically, that it had been 5 months, like he couldn't stop himself from filling in the detail, something inside me went completely quiet. 5 months meant it wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a moment. It was a decision they had been making over and over again while I was planning a future that no longer existed. I expected anger. Something explosive. Something that matched the scale of what was happening. But it didn't come. What came instead was clarity. Cold and immediate. I saw everything at once. The late nights. The distractions. The way they had both answered me with the same words. The way I had ignored every signal, because I didn't want to be wrong about the people I trusted. And once I saw it that clearly, there was nothing left to fight for. I didn't ask questions. I didn't argue. I didn't give them the reaction they were probably expecting. I just stepped back, looked at both of them like I was seeing them for the first time, and realized something that mattered more than anything they could say. They hadn't just betrayed me. They had already replaced me. Walking away should have felt like the end of something. But it didn't. It felt like stepping out of a version of my life that had already collapsed without me realizing it. The aftermath wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet in a way that made everything heavier. Filled with conversations that didn't fix anything and silences that said more than words ever could. My parents reacted the way people do when reality doesn't match what they want to believe. My father angry in a way that didn't change anything. My mother trying to hold on to a version of the story where this wasn't as bad as it clearly was. The rest of the world revealed itself in smaller, sharper ways. Friends who admitted they had noticed something but didn't say anything because it wasn't their place. People who chose comfort over honesty. And the slow realization that I had been the only one still fully invested in something that everyone else had already moved on from. Meanwhile, my sister didn't hesitate. She stepped into the space I had left behind like it had always been hers. Continuing plans. Rewriting timelines. Adjusting details like replacing me was just a practical decision instead of a betrayal. That was when staying became impossible. Not because I couldn't survive it, but because surviving it would have meant accepting a version of reality where none of this mattered. So I left. New city. New role. New routines built from nothing but necessity. Not because I felt strong, but because I didn't have another option. And at first, it didn't feel like rebuilding. It felt like existing in a space where nothing reminded me of who I used to be. But over time, that distance became something else. Not healing, not yet, but clarity. Enough to start understanding that what I lost wasn't the life I thought it was. It was something that had already stopped being real, long before I walked away. Years later, when everything had settled into something that finally felt like mine, I understood the part of the story they never expected. Losing him wasn't the worst thing that happened to me. It just felt like it at the time because I didn't yet understand what I was actually being removed from. The life they built together didn't become the version of success she thought she was taking from me. It became something unstable, tense, and controlled in ways she couldn't easily escape. The same traits I had ignored in him didn't disappear. They redirected. And eventually, they landed on her. Meanwhile, I built something that didn't need to look perfect to be real. A career I earned without anyone's approval. A relationship based on consistency instead of performance. And a life that no longer revolved around competing for space that should have been mine from the beginning. When she reached out, it wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. A message that tried to sound neutral but carried something underneath it. Regret. Maybe. Or just the realization that things hadn't worked out the way she expected. I read it once and didn't respond. Not because I was still angry, but because I wasn't. What I felt instead was something colder and more final. Indifference. Some things don't need closure. They just need distance. And distance gave me something I never had before. Clarity. She didn't take my life. She removed me from something that was already falling apart. And that turned out to be the only reason I was able to build something better. So tell me, would you ever forgive a sister who did this? Or cut her off for good? Comment your answer below. And if you want more stories like this, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one.